And I was very, very lucky this time with my panel because CSA brought all my panelists except for Dele, but she brought all my panelists to me. So thank you guys so much for supporting this event and bringing this fine group of panelists. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Keith, and I will let him take over. And I kind of just introduced each of the panelists, but it'd be nice for you to let them have the mic and do another introduction. So everyone, let's welcome our panelists.
Thanks again, everybody. Thank you for staying around. You already heard from me earlier. Now it's time to hear from the real experts. So please, first and foremost, Dr. Dele, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Dele Bankole. So I've been in cybersecurity going on 24 years now. 20 of those years, yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's moisturized. Thank you so much. So 20 of those years were dedicated to government consulting. So if you've heard of it, I've probably worked there, Coast Guard, Department of State, Department of Transportation. So just to give you, I've probably worked at over 15 government agencies, including a couple of state, I'm from Maryland, so a couple of state agencies. Currently, I'm the Director of IT Security at Center for Employment Opportunities. So the mission of our organization is for people who have been released from prison. We help them with resume prep, job search, just kind of prep them before they go back out into the real world, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Anahi, Santiago. I'm the CISO at ChristianaCare. Christiana is the largest health system in Delaware, also serving Maryland, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. I had to think about that. Today actually marks my 8th year there. Prior to that, I spent 10 and a half years as the Information Security and Privacy Officer at Einstein Healthcare Network. And I've got a little former Einstein crew over there.
Hi, David Lingenfelter. First of all, happy Star Wars Day. I'm the Vice President of Information Security at Penn Entertainment. We're the unknown casino company, but we've got 40 casinos around the country. We have a small sports book called Barstool and another one up in Canada called The Score. I've been with Penn for 6 years. I've been in this industry doing security stuff for almost 30.
No, you look like a baby.
I'm not offended. Really, I'm not. Yeah, I've been doing this a long time. It's a phenomenal career. I stumbled into it by accident, and I absolutely love what I do. Love security, love teaching people about security, and telling everybody all the horror stories that I've had throughout the year. So this is going to be fun.
So I'm Brian Martin with Liticode, and that is a consulting company up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and we do pretty much everything in information security. I've been doing this an awfully long time. Liticode is what I do when I'm not doing valuable things for other people. So feel free to hit me up if you have something in information security that you want done, because I'm really, really good at it. I've been doing this a long time. Does anybody else remember the Rainbow books? Yeah. Did you have them on your desk? Yeah. What about the Unix Wars? I have all the posters. You remember the Unisys posters for the Unix Wars? The Wizards? Anyways, that's it. On with the show.
Talk about some major league talent up here. So I'm going to keep this informal. It's happy hour. We're going to make this conversation style. So anybody who wants to jump in there, first I'm going to ask, how should ordinary organizations, how concerned should they be about nation-state attacks, and what is the real threat? Who wants to jump in?
Don't worry about it. It's not a thing.
Good answer.
Obviously, depending on your industry, if you do anything in infrastructure, if you do anything for the federal government, local governments, state governments, you need to be directly concerned. They're coming after you. If you're in hospitality or if you're in healthcare, they're coming after you because you've got a lot of data. If you're a small mom and pop company that don't have any customer data or don't have a lot of important information, they're coming after you because you're the supply chain to those big companies. So nation state is definitely something that everybody needs to be aware of. You may not be a target, and if they're not coming after you because you're in the supply chain, you're going to get hit with shrapnel, because the nation states are going after big targets, but they're throwing a lot of FUD out there and a lot of shrapnel out there to deflect and to just get everybody's attention. So that's my opinion anyway, and good luck.
So I'll tell a story that actually took place this week, because it's not just the attack, it's just the continuum of the responding to that attack. And so in late January, there's an organization called KillNet. It's a pro-Russian hacktivist group, and they announced that they were going to hit at least one hospital in every state with denial of service attacks. Being the largest health system in Delaware, we were the target. And they took down our website, which was hosted somewhere else, for 4 hours. They tried to come after our network, but we had protections in place and just dropped the traffic. Fast forward to this past week, KillNet announced that they're no longer a hacktivist group. They are now a contractor to the Russian state government. And I had my risk management committee meeting this week, and I explained to them the implications of what that means, not just from a potential attack vector, but the fact that if they're able to launch a successful attack against us, even though they're known for DDoS, they're growing. If all of a sudden we have to, we're hit with ransomware and we have to decide whether to pay or not, and our hospital systems are down and we can't care for patients, and they end up on the OFAC list, which is a list of terrorist organizations that US companies are not allowed to do business with, we can't pay them. And for an organization of our size, that has major implications. We're the only level 1 trauma center between Philadelphia and Baltimore. If we have to divert patients, those ambulances are gonna have to travel dozens of miles to get to the next emergency room. So real life implications. And in addition to that, the insurance carriers are now implementing exclusions for acts of war. And the definition of an act of war in the context of cyber is very different. Now, another really good story is that Merck just won a lawsuit in the courts, and insurers have to pay, $1.8 billion to Merck in response to their cyber attack, because the courts determined that what happened to them with ransomware, even though it was Russia going after Ukraine, was not an act of war. So this is a really fluid space, not just in responding to the actual attack, but insurance, to pay or not to pay, and all the different things that you have to think about when it comes to dealing with nation states.
I just want to add to what they said. It's a spectrum. The most important thing is to do your risk management right, because if you are an actual target of a nation state or a professional group in another nation that is interested in your intellectual property, it's about the value. It's about money. It's about what you can do. And what we need to do as practitioners in defense is deal with the time aspects of that. Implement your defenses according to your risk needs, and you can't mess up, because that's what risk management is all about. Make sure your insurance is right, make sure you've done what you need to do. But if somebody wants your goods bad enough, there's nothing you can do to stop them. Information security is about time management and response to attacks. It is not about making something proof against attacks, because we should know that that's not possible. We can block amateurs, we can slow things down, but if somebody's really dedicated and wants in, and I know this is real because I do red team stuff, if I want what's in your company, there's nothing you can do to stop me. I will go to enormous lengths to get what I want, which in my case is just red flags, but in their case, maybe the intellectual property that drives your value as a company. So just do your risk management well, do the basics well, that's all you can do.
Dr. Dele? All right. I guess it's obvious, everyone needs to care about it. Doesn't matter what size you are. So tell me, what are some of the biggest threats in your environment and your customer base, and why should people be concerned?
So I believe you touched on it during your keynote. Insider threat is so real, insider threat. And when we talk about insider threat, we're talking about, so for example, let's say your organization has a policy of, don't go to gambling websites. No, sorry, my bad. I'm not talking about yours specifically. But unfortunately, a lot of sites that are not, a lot of sites are not legitimized. So that's where the viruses start happening, and you click on, one, and then you click on another. So yes, there are technical solutions in place. Yes, we do have pen testing annually, and again, I'm just speaking high level. Yes, you do your vulnerability scans. Yes, you have your antivirus scans. Wonderful, but training is one thing that can combat as much insider threat as possible. And it's so interesting because I go through different conferences, I meet different people, and I find it interesting to where from when I started in cybersecurity 24 years ago, training was a thing. It was a go-to. It was like, yes, let's train, security training, role-based training, phishing. But now, for some reason, our industry is kind of leaning off toward the training aspect. And just like you said, that is worth much more than any automated systems that you can implement in your organization. So insider threat. Did you want to add?
The website is that you should go to. No, I'm kidding. I agree 100%. Insider threat is absolutely the biggest fear that we have.
Fill her up.
Round two.
We need red wine.
But the insider threat doesn't just end with your insiders. I mentioned it already, the supply chain. You've got vendors that have insider threats, and you've got vendors that have contractors that are technically insider threats. We've all read it in the news that it was a contractor with using his personal laptop to log into whoever's repository. I'm not naming names here today, but they were breached, and their code was breached, and this was a supply chain attack, and it was because of an insider who was not following the rules.
And it's so interesting that we talk about your third party, right? Because something that's really taken off within the cybersecurity industry is the vendor management piece, the vendor risk management. And it's so interesting from what you said. I'm sorry. Let me see your badge again. Sorry, I can't read it from here. Thank you, Brian. It's so interesting because he said that, if they really want your data, the bad actors are going to really come for it. And so, of course, I'm going to give an example. So I worked in one position, and we implemented a heavy vendor risk management program, meaning that we're not going to allow any vendors to work with our organization unless they have a security certification. So think SOC 2 reports, PCI or, ISO. So they had it, but unfortunately, guess what? They still hacked. So doing your due diligence, doing as much as you can to make sure that you operate in a secure environment is, that's all you can do.
Great. So what's the real-world impact of a cyber attack on a business? Can you give some worst case and some medium case scenarios if somebody gets hit?
Well, I think I just gave you the example of if we get hit with ransomware and we have to divert ambulances from our emergency room, they're going either to Baltimore or to Philadelphia. That has life implications. In addition to that, we would have to cancel surgeries. We would have to cancel cancer treatment. We would have to cancel things that lives depend on. So for us, it has some very, very serious implications.
I would like to add.
I've done some threat work, and the one that scares me the most is food and medicine, getting into the chemical systems, getting into chemistry, getting into different safety features in the industrial processing. So right now I'm doing work in the OT environment. I'm a huge fan. I love machines. I've worked in robotics for a long time. But the OT aspects of food, medicine, and manufacturing are where I'm a little concerned. because you can do things and then undo what you did, and it looks like nothing happened. If you can get into the OT systems and mess with some of the control features, and it goes unnoticed, if you can mess with the water system and take away the chlorine for a couple hours, that can cause some fun things to happen. So that's big things that can affect a large amount of people.
Thank you. And a real scenario, and this has been in the news, so I'm not trying to put anybody on the chopping block, but what happened to Baltimore City? So it had an enormous impact to Baltimore City, to people who were not getting their water bill. Real estate got affected, transportation schedules, and that's because, they were hacked. Now, they did have an issue, again, you can Google it, so I'm not giving any insider information, where the threat actor were trying to demand a ransom, and I was very proud of Baltimore City because they were like, oh, no, thank you, we're good. So, ultimately they had varying redundancy environment. They had manual type backups, so they were able to recover, not as quickly as we would like, but yeah, so that's a real
Okay.
heavy hitter.
So what kind of tools and technologies are your organizations prioritizing to prevent these types of attacks?
So I'll go first. I think that the phishing, the phishing exercises that we run every 2 months are effective as a component of our education and awareness platform, which I think is critical to being able to combat some of the risks of insider threat. But I think we employ the same things that everybody employs, right? Obviously you need your firewalls, your IPS, your IDS. As you move to the cloud posture management, data loss prevention. I mean, throw an acronym at me, and I probably have a tool that does it. It's it's an expensive industry to be able to combat, and it's still not foolproof. So I think prioritization is really important, especially with limited budgets. But the basics around hygiene are almost more important than the technologies.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Anahi nailed it. It's defense in depth. One tool's not going to solve it. One technology's not going to solve it. You've got to have multiple layers. We see that all the time where when we're investigating something that happened, we'll see that it got through one tool, but it got stopped by a second, or maybe it got stopped by a third. Here's another novel approach. For your inside threat problem, block outbound traffic. Sounds simple. People that are doing it are like, duh, but not everybody does that. So your malware is going to try to phone home to something. You should be monitoring outbound traffic. If it's not going out over a standard port, it shouldn't be allowed out. If it is going out over a standard port, it should be monitored and it should be blocked if it's going to rogue or unknown ports. Too many companies leave outbound access wide open, and that's where a lot of the problems come in, because these malware that hit the PCs, they're going out over odd ports, not going out over standard ports, and they're just getting out and nobody's noticing it.
Okay.
So again, because I do have a number of years government contracting, one thing that I've noticed is implementing a corporate device only environment in your workforce. So pretty much whenever you're doing your organizational work, do it on your organizational assigned laptop, do it on your corporate assigned tablet or cell phones. And I've seen that there's been a lot of pushback because they're like, well, you don't let us download, this software. We need this. I need to text somebody. I don't want to carry 2 phones. But I find that, when you take that step as the first step, it really does help tremendously, in protecting our data. So
I love that. Keep work and life separate.
yeah,
It's the best way to go about it.
you'll
So,
be surprised at the pushback that I get.
so we have a question in the back. Go ahead, Mike.
We've been told to not let
Oh.
you speak until
Get them out.
No.
All right, make it quick.
You guys manage a lot of vendors from a product perspective as well as a services perspective. What do you think are the best practices for making sure your vendors stay aligned with your guys' goals?
So I'll repeat the question for the people that are listening virtually. The question essentially is, with all the supply chain, with all the vendors that we manage, what are best practices in ensuring that our vendors are aligned with our security practices?
Communication. Did anybody not hear that? Communication.
I can add to that. So you guys, I can talk about this all day. I love it. Love cybersecurity. So at a high level, definitely an annual, at the very beginning phase, contracts. Put a notation in your contract that we will be reviewing, again, whatever security certification you have. So whether you have, again, just as an example, SOC 2, Type 2 reports, whether you have your ISO, we will be reviewing that annually. And then we will also make it that whenever their environment changes. So of course, yes, you can do we have our annual security assessment, here's our SOC report, we're good. But sometimes you have major changes that happen within your environment. So we put a clause in our contract that whenever there's a major change in your environment, please, again, undergo your evaluation, and we need a copy of that evaluation. So that does take a lot, to stay on top of those vendors, because for me and my team, I do review these reports every year, when, it's that time, we gotta review it, because we work with a lot of sensitive information, as I'm sure most of you guys do. So safeguarding it, making sure that they're being safeguarded by our vendors is a top priority.
Yeah, and I'll add, you can't even submit a contract without it coming to our security team for a risk assessment. And that includes not just things that are going to be installed on our network, but anything that either is going to have access to our network, even if virtually, or access to our data. And so I joke that at this point, the only contracts I don't see are linens. But eventually, linens are going to have heat sensors, and they're going to be able to measure your blood pressure. So I'll be seeing everything. But our addendum, our security addendum, is about 12 pages long. So how I hold them accountable to our standards is by requiring them contractually to meet the same standards. And in part of that is, and they need to hold their subcontractors to those same standards that are in that agreement. It's really time consuming, but I think it's a really, really important component in this, in our dependence. And the only other thing that I would add is it's not just about the data. A lot of times the vendors will come to me and say, but we're only processing non-confidential information, but you're on my network. And the minute you're on my network, you're adding risk to my organization. Not to use names, but SolarWinds made this conversation a lot easier because they proved that it's not, it's not just about the data, it's about the connectivity and the risk to our network. But if you get that kind of pushback, I would fight back, because it's not just about the data.
Right.
We all like this one. We all like this question, but before I go, Rob, would you mind? Thank you.
Chop, chop.
Yeah, so everything that's been said, contracts, review, minimize access, just give them access to what they need, give them only the data they need, document what data they have access to, because when it happens, you're gonna need to know what data they had and what data is now exposed. So document all that, give them only what they need, and monitor the crap out of them.
So I'm not getting paid by any vendors for this, so I'm not going to name any names, but I don't have access to the personnel resources that these guys do, and none of my clients want to have access to the personnel resources that these guys do. So we want to see things automated. We want to understand insights into the security perspectives of our contractors and our third-party relationships, and we want all of that knowledge and understanding to be automated. We want a web of trust. There are vendors that do this sort of thing, that let you implement a status with your different contracts and vendors so that you know when things are going wonky, unless they're cheating the system, which is another problem. But theoretically, this is a much more lean way of doing business, especially if you're dealing with SaaS companies. I do not want to be reviewing anything past the contract. So I don't want to see your ISO, I don't want to see your reports, I don't want to know your scans. I want to know from a feed that you are getting that done and that it is in good standing by a neutral third party. So anything that helps with automation, manpower reduction and gets these things done faster, better, cheaper for us, I'm all for 100%.
Great, thank you for the question. So, as security leaders, can you share some advice for the practitioners in the room on the best ways they can report threat levels to you, and then how you report that back to your board? You know, how do you want your teams to communicate to you when something's going
I'll
on?
answer every question.
Go for it.
I guess we're the chatty ones in this panel. So for the practitioners to feed information into into my office, we're not a huge team. We're a team of 16, and so I talk to my team on each and every day, and we actually have a chat that from 10:30 to 11. We open up a Teams chat, and people start putting in their vulnerabilities for the last 24 hours that have been seen in the news, anything of note that has to do with threat management, and I monitor that to make sure that I'm staying abreast of the threat landscape. But I'll be very honest. Full disclosure, I'm on the board of directors for Health ISAC, which is an information sharing and threat information sharing organization, and I stay very close to their threat feeds, their listservs. So my team, by the time my team gets to me, I probably already know it, just because I'm just that tapped into the threat landscape. But to me, it's really important that my team feels very comfortable coming to me with any and all information. Nothing is too unimportant not to share. And then in terms of how I share it with the board, it's very different. The board understands risk. And so when I'm talking to the board, I use education a lot as opposed to threat specifics. But then I talk about it in the context of risk. And the previous example that I shared around, our ability to pay or not pay, our ability to get insurance coverage, nation states, those are things that I bring to the board in a way that they can understand. So I don't talk about, KillNet doing X, Y, and Z, but more around here's a scenario that is playing itself out in our industry, and here's what it means to us. And I use something that's called comparative analysis with our board, where if there's a big incident like Colonial Pipeline, I will do a comparative analysis of here's what happened, here's what the impact if it happened to us, and here's why it couldn't or could happen to us. And then we have a dialogue about if it could, what are the things that we can do or have done to ensure that we minimize the potential for risk. So it's really all about risk and education.
We're a very decentralized company, so we've got 40 casinos around the country. Every casino has their own IT team, their own stack. And I'll preface this by saying email is probably the worst invention ever done as part of computers. Everybody relies on it, everybody needs it, but it's so out of band, nobody pays attention to it. I've taught my security teams for the last 15 years that I've had security teams working for me. The best way to learn what's happening at the properties, what's happening out at the endpoints, talk to people. Just reach out to them, see what's going on. And it's amazing how once you made that connection verbally, to actually talking with people, how much they're willing to open up and say, oh yeah, by the way, I got this the other day. I didn't think I needed to report it. Well, that's a problem. So having those lines of communication, it really comes down to that, is communication. Just make sure you're talking with your practitioners, understanding that security is not this big dark force that says no all the time. We want to be an enabler. We want to enable the company to succeed, to keep going, because the bad guys are out there that want us to fail. All we want to do is make the company successful, and we can only do that through communication. So talk to the practitioners, make them understand that we're people too. Security people are just people too, and all we want to do is help. So they shouldn't be afraid to tell us when they clicked on something bad. That's something that I have taught my team, the IT teams, the finance teams. Finance is a big offender of this. At every company I've ever worked for is, if you've done something that you realize is bad, please bring it to our attention immediately so we can help you fix it. And that's what it comes down to, is just that level of communication and building those relationships.
Great. All right, awesome. So I'm freewheeling here a little bit, but since we have this we have a question. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to ask the same question, but for small and medium businesses, since a lot of them don't have a CISO on board, or even maybe an IT team, you know, where do they go when they actually do click a malicious link? What would their first steps be in your recommendations?
So I would assume, in the absence of a CISO, that they would have some kind of help desk, tech support. I didn't know if you wanted to take the scenario a bit further. So definitely to start off, you know, I would say definitely report such security incidents to the help desk, because at least it's documented, and then the help desk team can research, you know, how to mitigate those risks. That'll be first step for me.
Yeah, I agree. If you have an in-house help desk, go to them. Small companies, go to your boss. They don't like knowing bad news. I've worked for a lot of small companies, and plausible deniability is a real thing, and once they find out something bad, they want it resolved because they don't want to be responsible for it.
All right, great. So, since the four of you have made it to the top of the security ladder, are there any pearls of wisdom that you can throw out to the people up the ranks? What it takes to be in your role, some steps, some professional development activities that they can partake in to eventually get to that top CISO role?
So for me, this topic, I'm a little bit passionate about it because, so I started in cybersecurity so I got my bachelor's degree in computer networking. But at that time, I was in finance, so, you know, accounts payable, accounts receivable. But when I got my bachelor's degree, I was just like, okay, I've spent 4 years in a university. I'm going to find an IT job, whether it kills me. We're working in IT because we have 4 years invested. So interestingly enough, you know, for those who watched my interview with Kim, so I landed my first role in a NOC, Network Operations Center. And I'm telling you this story because I'm sure you can pull something from it. So got my first official IT job in a network operations center, and I hated it. Oh my gosh, shout out to the engineers, system administrators, God bless you and your brain. It was just 10 hours of just incident response. I'm monitoring intrusion detection systems. I'm reporting to the CERT team. I'm performing scans, and I'm like, this is not life. Oh my God. So I decided, you know what? Let me make the most of my first official IT job. So I'm, you know, more of an extrovert. I love working with people. I love to document policies, procedures, you name it, I got it. So I noticed in the environment that we did not have a formal training program. So a junior, so again, the NOC environment, a lot of the positions were mainly entry level. So the training program was to have a junior person start, they sit next to a senior person that's been there for over a year, they take a notepad and a pen and they take notes for 30 days, and that was the training program. And intuitively, I was just like, this math is not mathing. This doesn't make sense. So I started to document everything. Start to document how you use different tools, how do you scan, how do you work with the engineering team, how do you work with the CERT team, et cetera, et cetera. So as I'm doing that, I found my happy place. Please note, this was in addition to my 10-hour shift. So because I wanted to find the joy in being IT, I'm like, oh, well, this is fun. So I'm just like documenting. And then I found myself starting to send out emails to our team, how to work together, how to cooperate, how to collaborate. So now I'm just like, okay, yes, now this is it. This is how you work. This is IT. My boss at the time said, you know, Dele, there's a field called, for those of you out there who remember, certification and accreditation. Does anybody remember that term? Okay. And I was just like, wait, what? What I'm doing for fun is a real job? He was like, yes, just check it out. So thankfully, my 3 years in the NOC, I then, you know, propelled me to, you know, formal or more on the audit risk management side of cybersecurity. So I'm so thankful that I've been privileged to work virtually every role in cyber. I've been a junior analyst, mid, senior, I've been a manager, I've been a senior manager, I've been an external assessor, so third-party assessor, internal assessor. I've set up programs, I've implemented, cybersecurity programs, and I say all this to say, always keep learning. What I see currently in our cybersecurity industry is that we have a lot of newcomers in the industry. They get their role, and they're like, okay, yes, now I can sit down and relax. No, you go to sleep, you wake up, and it has changed from NIST 800 Rev 4 to NIST 800 Rev 5, 853 Rev 5. It's always changing. We're always moving. So always keep that knowledge base. And to take it a step further, I'm a hands-on learner. So again, feeding into, how you ingest knowledge, and when webinars and, looking at videos, YouTube videos just does not excite me at all. I need to be in person. So when you find that, okay, you know what, I can learn, I think I need to go into a classroom setting. So of course, we do have our schedules that we have to balance, understood. But I learned that I ingested more knowledge when I was, with the people, talking to people, Security certifications is also another great way, lean in on your mentors if you have one, lean in on your managers, and they will continue to propel you. So continuous education, definitely, and the drive.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a softball for me because I teach a CISO boot camp. So I teach, a curriculum to get, it's specific to healthcare, but it applies to everything. It's to get the people that are ready for that next CISO job ready. And one of the things that we teach is you're gonna have to let go of the technical. It doesn't mean that you have to stop being technical, but you're gonna have to let go of the technical and you're gonna have to start thinking like an executive. And that is a very different way of thinking. It is about business speak. It's about speaking in non-technical terms, thinking about what's important to your organization and figuring out how to build a security strategy that enables what the organization wants to accomplish. It's about thinking about customer service. I tell my team, we're only 2 hands away from the patient. Every decision that we make has an effect on patient care, even if we're not the ones actually performing the surgery. The surgeon relies on the technology that we may block in the name of security, and now somebody can't care for an individual. So it's really about taking all of the skill sets and all of the knowledge that we have and flipping it on its side, and now figuring out how to use it to help the organization thrive in whatever their mission and vision is. And the other thing that I would add is build your network. We at the top don't have any friends in our organization that know more than we do. And so we can solve problems on our own, or we can reach out to our friends and the people that we know in our network who are grappling with the same issues that we're grappling with, and either help solve it together or learn from each other, and perhaps somebody else has already solved it. I had a CIO who's a friend of mine who sent me a job description for a director of information security. He wanted me to just review it. And he did a great job. I said to him, the only thing that's missing from here is a requirement that they either build or maintain an existing network of peers. I think it's that important that it should be in every job description for a will-be information security leader.
Ditto. No, I'll tell you a little bit about my story, my transition. So most of you don't know me out there, I'm extremely technical. I come from a very technical background. I think in ones and zeros. And about 16, 17 years ago, I went to my boss, who was the CIO at the time. I was running security for a small company that made mobile device management software. And I said, I want to work with our marketing team, and I want to go out and I want to be the speaker at our road shows. He was like, why would you want to do that? That's beneath you. I was like, no, I'm very uncomfortable around people, and I need to be able to talk to people. I need to be able to stand up in front of people. If I want my career to move beyond me being the quote-unquote firewall guy, which is what I was at the time, I need to, and I ran security, but I was still thought of as the firewall guy, because back then, 15, 16, 17 years ago, that's what security was. The guys and women that ran security back then, they were the firewall and the IPS people. They weren't the business people. They weren't the executives. So I said, I need to get out. I need to become comfortable talking with people, and I need to learn how to talk to people who don't necessarily understand the technology behind it. So that's what I did. He agreed with it. He thought it was a great idea. I went on road shows all over the place and learned how to communicate. Goes back to my previous response about communication. It's critical. If you're going to run a security team, if you're going to run a security program at any company, as Anahi said, nobody knows the technical stuff the way we do. Nobody knows the details about the stuff that we know. So we need to figure out, how do we translate to people that control the finances, control the business aspect, control the company? How do we talk to the board members who don't even know what our technology does within our own business? They just know how to make money. How do we explain to them the need for security in a language that they understand? And it's that communication. It's learning, what do they know? How do they understand what we do? And being able to translate the security side of what we know to the business aspect. What's the business impact? What's the business risk? What happens to the business if this data gets exposed? What will our customers think? What's the end story here if we have this breach? Do we just pay it and nobody knows? Does the customer know? Does the customer never come back? Are they not comfortable? In Anahi's world, does the customer not survive? It's that level of communication, and it's not talking about technology. It's not talking about what the breach is or who the bad actor is or what really cool name some media organization gave them because that's what people understand. And it's not talking about ChatGPT. It's talking about the business and how the business is impacted by security.
I have a virtual question. And John, since you were talking about ChatGPT, this would be for you. How do you think emerging tech, this is from James virtually, so James, thank you for participating. How do you think emerging technologies such as ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot will impact the cyber threat landscape, and what risks do they pose in terms of making it easier for bad actors to carry out attacks or develop new malware? That could be for
such a softball. It's horrible. It is going to open up all sorts of problems. At the same time, it's going to give security people opportunities to also learn. So AI, generative AI in general right now, I've told our company not to use it. I know other companies have said that it's forbidden and you can't use it yet until we get process in place, until we get policies in place. In the meantime, the bad guys are already using it, and they're already learning from it, and they're already getting things from it. So it's a tough situation we're in. This is another technology, just like most technologies came out. When Wi-Fi came out, everybody wanted to deploy it because it made it easy, but the encryption wasn't there yet. We all remember those if we had those early encryption days. But with a new technology, just like every new technology that comes out, the bad guys take advantage of it first. We end up learning from our own mistakes. And as we continue to mature as part of a company, as security continues to mature and become part of a business driver, we now have more voice than we used to in the past. So now we're able to say earlier and sooner, we need to tap the brakes on this one. We need to pause and just wait until we get some policy in place, until we get some regulations in place, until something happens. And I feel, again, I've been doing this for a few years, I really feel that this is where we're at this pivot point where the AIs of the world, the generative AIs are out there, and we're at a point where we can say, let's not do this yet. Let's let the technology mature. Let's let the monitoring and controlling of this mature. And I think this is the first opportunity I've ever experienced where we're at the point where we're saying, stop it before we realize how bad it's going to be.
I have one more question and Brian, maybe, unless you want to comment on that. I have one more virtual question.
Go ahead.
Well, you can go ahead and take this question. Can we consider the antivirus or the security company, and this is from Roman, so thank you to our virtual viewers out there for chiming in. Roman said, can we consider the antivirus or the security company as a risk to our environment? And if we don't trust anyone, should we trust security companies? No offense to all the sponsors all around the room.
I was gonna say,
Yeah, I'm not, hopefully I'm understanding the question. I don't think antivirus is evil. I think, antivirus, endpoint detection and response, which is the more mature version of antivirus, is a huge component in our organization and our ability not only to stop threats, but to do threat hunting. And to conduct our Purple Team exercises. I think it's a primary tool that we use whenever we do Purple Team exercises in terms of looking at the MITRE attack framework and determining where we can detect things, whether we can log them, whether we can alert on them. And so it's a place where we continuously get mature because the tool is so powerful. We have a gazillion vendors, security vendors. I trust all of them, but with trust comes validation. And so I push my vendors as partners to be the best version of a partner that they can be. And if they respond appropriately, then they become a long-term partner. And if they don't, then they get bounced for somebody that does it better. But it's really about partnerships. You can't really implement a security program without security vendors.
Brian, do you have anything to say about any of those two questions? We haven't heard from you in a while.
Sure. It comes back to the basics. Risk management, know your vendors. Know who you're dealing with. Look into what's going on there. It's just like any other component in your security program. If you've got a vendor that gets bought by another company and that other company has venture capital investors and those venture capital investors have to work for a foreign government that does not like America very much, you might find yourself in a problem situation. On the other hand, most security vendors don't fall into that problem, and it's just a matter of you doing your due diligence. It's across the whole spectrum. We've all got charts and different things that we can use for compliance and security framework monitoring. Doing risk management is doing risk management, but you have to do it across all of the aspects, including vendors, and whether or not you want to trust them with certain capabilities.
Great. Any more virtuals? No? Or in person? All right.
We've got a couple here.
One here and then one in the back.
Howdy. Yeah, so you guys talk about vendor management and due diligence and vet your vendor. What source are you guys use to vet the vendor? Is it Dun & Bradstreet, their reputation? Is there a database where you guys check to see this vendor A is ABCDE fits the bill? Is there like a holy grail databases where vendors are vetted?
No, there's not any one single source, and it depends on the vendor. Some of them, it can get fairly complicated, but it's pretty easy. Once you hit a point where you're uncomfortable, that's a big warning sign. So it's about communication, talking to them. If you know the vendor, if you know the people that are involved, if you know the ownership of the company, then you've got a level of trust there. Like, I can pretty much trust IBM, right? I know where they are. I know what they've got. I didn't say anything about quality or output. Just the vendor. No, they're fine. They're fine. But it's going to depend on the vendor and what it is you're looking at. If it's a manufacturer, you may have supply chain issues there that involve a different piece that impacts information security but has nothing to do with it. What do I care about where that widget was made? Well, it turns out if you use substandard parts on that, it affects your Wi-Fi, and that causes us problems. So how far you have to drill down into ownership and into relationships, that's where it gets tricky, and that's where risk management comes back into focus. And you're like, what is the real risk here? Do I need to put that much effort into it? And then the easy aspect is threat management, like some of our vendors deal with over here. And that's it. It's how much you have to spend on it, how much effort you want to put into it. And if it's worth the squeeze, then you squeeze the rock until it bleeds. That's the way it works. If I'm Elon Musk and I'm building rocket ships, I want to know darn well where those pieces are coming from. I want to make sure that the quality control is perfect on them. Same with information security.
I'll give the business answer. Make sure the contracts are solid. That's not all vendors are created equal, so you're not using them all the same, but make sure your contracts have clauses in it for if they have a breach. What are they on the hook for? How much are they on the hook for? What's their liability? What's your liability if they have a breach? And there are vendors out there that do risk assessments. There's several of them here today that do risk assessments of vendors. But honestly, from my standpoint, it comes down to reviewing what the vendors have done from a security perspective, what certifications they've gone through, what documents they can show me that they have done their security due diligence, and then writing it into the contract that vendor X, we're giving you this much responsibility, and therefore we're expecting this much back from you if something goes wrong.
All right, great. I saw two more hands. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Dele, my apologies.
Just a little story behind that. I agree with both of them. So there was one vendor I was, vetting. One of our teams needed a specific software. This vendor, they were a smaller company. They did not have a formal security certification. So, of course, to me, it doesn't take them out of the running. So in the event where a vendor does not have a formal certification, I do have my own list of questions. So, like a vendor risk management questionnaire that I sit down, I interview the vendor, and then we go through these lists of questions. So in this specific scenario, I was asking varying questions, account management, physical security, just different, I would say they were more high level, and they were not willing to share the information with me. And I'm sitting there like, oh, okay, well, because in my head I'm like, oh, I guess we just won't be doing business, because what we're not going to do is work with a vendor that's not being transparent, but will be housing my data. That's just not ever going to happen ever in life. So to kind of add to their story, sometimes you do feel them out. Yeah.
All right, great.
So I had a question. I kind of come from a different space than probably most of you here. My organization does not have a security group at all. So basically, I'm the function of a CIO, CTO, and CISO all in one. And coming to these types of events is helping me gain some knowledge around security, and then obviously learning about vendors and different products that they can help me with. But one of the things I struggle when I come out and looking for information, it's around certifications and understanding the differences of, between FedRAMP and CMMC and NIST 800-171 and, all these things that I know because my company works with the federal government. We do federal government projects. We work with the DOD, and I'm struggling to really find out information around where are we, when are those compliance certifications going to be required, and what are the details? Because it seems to be so fluid and up in the air, and nobody really knows. It's it's in language with the law now, but we're not sure when that's going to come into effect. So I'm just trying to see if maybe you can give some guidance as to either where I can get that kind of specific information, or maybe other conference events where it kind of talks about it a little bit more.
I was kind of hoping you could help me with that.
Sorry.
It is acronym soup out there when it comes to certifications. I've been through FedRAMP Moderate. I've consulted people on FedRAMP High. I will say that is an actual pretty good one. ISO certifications, if a company has gone through an ISO certification, 27,000, that's a good one. There are some that are more nebulous, but then there are other industries that are required to have certain compliance. So we have to be PCI compliant because we take credit cards. That has some very specific guidelines to it. HIPAA compliance has some very specific guidelines to it. So if somebody can say that they're HIPAA compliant, you're in pretty good standings when it comes to that type of data. So it's really, I wish I could give you a better answer, but there are some that are very specific. They're typically very industry focused. So again, HIPAA, hospitals, PCI, payment cards, FedRAMP, federal. Those are all very specific, and those are usually the more mature ones that I've seen anyway.
So a practical tip for you that may help, use your MSPs. Use anybody that's a VAR in your organization, make them do the extra work for you, make them do legwork. You can always grill them, ask them questions, and get them to contribute. Sorry if you're an MSP or a VAR, I just threw you under the bus. But that's part of your job, so help out your smaller customers.
And I have to, because we are at an hour, and time flies when you're having fun, but I do want to wrap up with one question for each of you, including you, Keith. First of all, we couldn't be here today if it weren't for our sponsors and all the nonprofits here, so how about a round of applause for all of our sponsors? And this question would be really on behalf of what they would probably want to ask you, because every one of them in here would probably love to have the opportunity to be in front of you. And we all know, don't call, don't try to link in, because you probably have a million emails, a million messages on LinkedIn. So what is your advice to all the sponsors here? What is the best way to get in front of you, the CISO? What's your advice to them? And if you could give that in about 1 minute so we don't keep everyone here all night. Even though you guys are having a good time, I know some people have flights to catch.
Food, drinks, and entertainment never hurt. That's a good start, right? But know the business that you're coming after, that you're trying to sell to. Make sure it's relevant. That's pretty much what I have to say. I'll give everybody the opportunity to pitch. Whether I respond or not, it depends on how relevant they are to what my business is doing and what I need.
I completely agree. I've seen many tool sets, many vendors, and I came from government contracting. I'm now in nonprofit. So just continue to pitch, and just you never know where you land. So just stick in there.
I'm not as nice.
That's what we want to hear, the hard, cold truth.
If you ever get my out of office, it says, if you're a vendor trying to sell me something or soliciting, I delete all emails and will not respond to you. Please stop. Please be respectful and stop emailing me. I think sponsoring events like this, for me, it's about the relationship. If there's a face to a name, I'm warmer than I am to an email or to a cold call. If I get a LinkedIn invite that says sales or development, I'm ignoring it. It's too much. But if you attend events like this and start the conversation and continue the conversation, perhaps we won't do business that first year, but if I know you 5 years from now, there's a higher chance that I will pick up the phone or talk to you than if I'm just getting this cold email that's been unsolicited.
100%. Play the long game. Don't try to get my money right away.
So regarding LinkedIn, please feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to grow my follower base, so the more people that follow me, I'm happy. That doesn't necessarily mean you're getting a sale, but I am trying to get up above 4 digits, so go ahead. If you send me an email, I'm hitting the delete key with my pinky, so that's not going to happen. If you send me a meeting request that has not been agreed to by me, you will never be a vendor of mine. I've had a lot of those since COVID, by the way. Just people just sending me meeting invites, and I've never spoken to them. I've never gotten an email. If you reach out to my boss, before you reach out to me, chances are the relationship's not going to go well. I am not kind when it comes to vendors, and to all the vendors out there, I do apologize for that. But once you're a vendor of mine, we're going to be friends forever. And I agree with Anahi. Face-to-face is important. Getting to know the vendor, getting to know me is important. And that's what it comes down to. This is probably the 4th time I've said this, but it comes down to relationship building. Build the relationship. Don't cold call me. Don't say, pick one of these 4 options for our next conversation. Or, this is going to be my last email to you. Please get back to me. Those don't work. And again, you send me a meeting invite without sending me anything else and having any interest from me, it's over. Sorry.
Yeah, it's networking and trust. Whenever I'm working with a client and I have a problem, I turn to my network and I look at the vertical that I'm dealing with, and I approach my friends in those verticals and I ask them how they've solved that problem. And then I work with the vendors that they trust, because I know it works. And that's the easiest way for me to arrive at a solution that I know will work for this client.
And if I can add to this really quickly, as I mentioned in my keynote, I do thank the vendors. I do think you are a true pillar of this community. Without these events, nothing is possible. Just aim to be a partner. That's my last take on it.
Agreed, thank you. And thank you, we all know how busy you all are. There are many CISOs that were here today, there's many senior level people here today, and everyone here today. We all know how, bogged down you are with your day-to-day tasks. So thanks for being here, everyone, today. Thanks for spending the day with us. Thanks to you all for sitting on the panel. And that's it. The bar's still open, and thank you, everyone. And it was a great first year in Philly. We'll be back here next year, so we hope to see you all again next year.
Thank
Thank you.
Registration desk.